but still not close to the bull. Again the crowd applauded. Lastly, representing the north and House Fell, Jagen Fen. He watched as the Crannogman stepped to his spot, his breathing even and calm, unlike Gerion's own, which was quick and shallow. The young man pulled back the string and let loose. Gerion watched the arrow fly in almost fevered anticipation. "Whoosh," his daughter said, making him turn and laugh at her. "It's a bull. Dead center. We have our winner, my lords and ladies. I give you Jagen Fen, the winner of the Lannisport archery completion of 290 AK. The crowd cheered loudly, and Gerion's heart raced. He just looked at Jon, who sat there with an annoying, know-it-all grin on his face. He should never have thought him that he thought. He would have hugged the boy there and then, but joy was hogging him all to herself. Instead, he looked to see Tyrion wearing the same grin, and wait, was Jaime doing so as well? Even Sir Adam and Lord Crakehall were grinning. Had everyone bet on the archery? He just laughed out loud. Cersei looked at her brother with fury in her eyes. He was sat there smiling and laughing with the men of the West. While she was alone beside her drunken husband, she searched the crowd and saw her uncle sitting with the bastard, the boy holding her uncle's bastard daughter and laughing along with the girl. It made her sick. She noticed Joffrey had a bored look on his face and looked at the bastard again. That was the difference she thought breeding. Her golden prince was how true-bred children behave, not like the two bastards down there. Finally, she saw Daven and her expression changed into something more friendly. She had been at her lowest when her idiot brother had rejected her. Had she not been, then she would never have. Not with Daven anyway, but she was glad she did. He was firm and muscular, and with the right training was a pretty good fuck. She squeezed her thighs together as she felt the arousal stir inside her. The king would be drunk later. She smiled. She would indulge herself fully tonight. Margaery walked with Loras and Garland and their guards around the town. The archery had been much more exciting than she had thought it would, although truthfully she had spent most of her time watching Jon Snow. And joy. The little girl was a treasure, and how attentive and careful Jon was with her made her heart soar. "Did you enjoy the archery, sis?" Garland asked. "Yes, Gar. It was more fun than I thought it would be, although the other events should be even more exciting. What say you, Loras?" "Loras is a little upset, sis. Seems he bet on the wrong man. Who was the small fellow anyway? How the hell did he win?" Loras grumpily said before kicking a small stone. "Someone said he was a Crannogman," she heard Garland say. Loras just shrugged grumpily, causing her to smile. They walked contentedly along, stopping at some of the stalls, not buying anything, just passing the time. The melee would be on the morrow, so tonight there was a small dinner for just her family. Her grandmother had wanted to dine with the king, but after seeing him at the contest, she had decided not to push it. The man was drunk far more than he was sober. Margaery knew her grandmother and father wanted her to be queen. She wanted it too, but after seeing the bored, disdainful look that seemed to be forever entwined on Joffrey's face, the thoughts of him being her husband didn't fill her with any joy. Jaime made his way to the His Solar. The meeting with Lord Arryn was nigh, and he was ready for it. Tyrion and Gerion would be beside him. His uncle Kevan was entertaining the king, well making sure the man didn't fall down as drunk as he was, and he had sent Jon to ensure that the king would have someone to talk to. He found the man enjoyed having Ned's boy around, and while he preferred to keep him close to him, he felt it would be better if he had the meeting without him. When he arrived, he found Tyrion and Gerion already waiting. They entered the room and sat down. A serving girl came in and placed a tray with wine and some glasses on the table. He dismissed her, and Tyrion poured the wine, giving all of them a glass. "So, how well did you do?" his uncle asked. 300. Jaime made 400. And you? 1.00. His uncle replied, making them gasp. "You made 1,000 gold dragons on the archery. How much did you bet, uncle?" Tyrion's voice carried an air of unavailability in it. "I put 100 gold dragons on the man. Jon was certain he'd win, and he was right," his uncle proudly said. "You think he made any money himself?" Jaime asked. "Undoubtedly, although the boy doesn't spend anything on himself anyway," Gerion replied. Jaime just shook his head. He gave Jon an allowance, a generous one. They had argued about it before he told him that he represented the Lord of the West. It was to be expected. Jon had finally accepted it. Combined with the money his father sent and the fact that they paid for all his clothes and equipment, it left Jon with some nice pocket money. But try as they might, they couldn't get him to buy himself anything. Instead, he spent it on his guards, bought presents for Joy. He even got him Tyrion and Gerion presence, it'd frustrate the hell out of him, except for it just reminded him he was his father's son. The knock on the door broke his train of thought. He bid them enter, and Lord Arryn walked in. The old lord looked well rested and not as tired as he had been when he arrived, and a part of Jaime felt guilty that what he would say may disrupt that peace. "My lord Hand, to what do I owe the pleasure?" he asked as the man sat down. "I wish to discuss the finances of the realm, my lord," Jon Arryn said before greeting both Tyrion and Gerion. "Of course, my lord, and how can I help you?" "Well, Lord Jaime, as you know, your father lent the crown a substantial amount of money. It seems though we may need to not only extend the time frame for paying it back, but are in need of another loan also." Lord Arryn's bluntness pleased Jaime. "Indeed, my lord, on the extension I see no problem with that. However, on the further loan there is some difficulty, I'm afraid." "Difficulty, my lord?" "Well, I'll be blunt, Lord Arryn, if I may." "Of course, Lord Jaime." "I am not my father, my lord, while he was content to waste our money. I am not when there are essential projects that need funding here in the West." "Essential projects? Lord Jaime, what projects are those?" "Lannisport suffered great damage during the Ironborn attack, my lord, as did the Lannister fleet. Both of these need to be seen to, which requires money. I cannot loan the crown and repair the fleet, and I needs must do what's best for my people." "Of course, once we fulfilled those needs, we would be willing to accommodate when able," Tyrion said in a much more conciliatory tone after seeing the frown that Lord Arryn was wearing. "Very well then, I understand, although you leave me in a difficult position, Lord Jaime." "I'm afraid it can't be helped. Lord Arryn, as I said, I needs must fix my own problems first. Tyrion will accompany you and explain the terms regarding the outstanding debts. I'm sure you'll find them agreeable." "Very well, Lord Jaime, Lord Gerion. Shall we then, Lord Tyrion?" "Of course, my lord," his brother said as the two men made their leave. Jaime waited until they were both out of the room. Nodding to Gerion, his uncle got up and made sure they were gone before closing the door. Jaime swallowed down the wine in his glass and filled it once more as his uncle sat down and took a drink from his own. "Very well played, nephew. Very well played." Jon broke his fast early. He was excited for the day. The melee was something he looked forward to more so than the archery. Although he had made some coin for himself and his friends, his two guards had taken his advice and walked away with almost 6 moons' pay because of it, earning him wry smiles when he greeted them this morning. Last night had been odd for Jon. Jaime had a meeting with the Hand, along with Tyrion and Gerion, and Jon had assumed he'd be required, but instead he'd been asked to spend time with the king and his family. Both the Queen and the Prince had ignored him, and while the King was drunk and was as usual groping serving girls all night, he had taken the time to speak with Jon whenever he could. "So, Snow, looking forward to the melee?" the King had asked. Aye, your grace. Although truth be told, I'm eager for the squire's tourney to begin also." That's a good lad. Nothing gets the blood boiling more than fighting. I'll tell you, why the happiest times of my life were spent in battle fighting beside your father, my true brother," the King wistfully said before grabbing the serving girl and nuzzling her chest, forcing Jon to look away. Jon finished his meal and made his way to the front of the castle. He was eager to get to Lannisport earlier today. He knew Jaime would be leaving much later, and he wished to see some of the squires practice before he needed to do his duties. Gerion would be staying with Joy for most of the day, only leaving closer to the time of the melee, and Tyrion wasn't a morning person, so it gave Jon the opportunity for some free time. The ride to Lannisport was almost uneventful, but as they just about reached the town, he saw Aliers and Jaws stiffen on their horses, looking around to see what had got their attention. He watched as a group of horses rode past. The man at the front carried a large banner, 3 black dogs on a yellow field. Jon felt himself gulp as he finally saw the man himself, larger than any man he'd ever seen before, his black armor as dark as night. He looked up as the mountain that rides passed him by. Jaime. The crowd was starting to get excited as the competitors for the melee began to go through their paces. Jaime sat beside the king, who was surprisingly sober and seemingly eager for the melee to begin. His sister sat there with her expression ranging from bored to furious every time she caught his eye. Not that it bothered Jaime. He was just glad she hadn't tried to seduce him again. Her son was an enigma to Jaime. All the Lannister looks, yet none of the characteristics. He sat there with a bored look on his face, and Jaime could see every ounce of his mother in him. His brother had done an excellent job with the preparations. The archery had gone well, and the king had been kept entertained. The meeting with Lord Arryn had gone the way he wanted it, and Jon and Tyrion were meeting with Sir Willis later. Jaime turned to his uncle, who had left Joy behind for today. The melee, no place for a little girl. Uncle, so who's your money on? Clegane is probably the favorite, but I fancy the crazy priest. Thoros. Aye. Didn't you say he was first through the walls at Pike? Yeah, although I think he may have been drunk. Jaime laughed. He watched as some of the competitors began to spar with their squires and companions. Just a light workout to loosen the muscles. Watching it made him wish he was down there himself. If there was one thing he hated about hosting this tourney, it was the fact he couldn't compete for his own prize money. He smiled as Jon and Tyrion made their way to the seats, noticing the scowl. Cersei gave Tyrion, or was it Jon? Hell, the woman was scowling at both of them. What was that all about? He wondered. My lord, brother, the two said as they took their seats. So, who'd you bet on this time, Jon? His uncle asked, making Jaime shake his head. They'd all won good coin on Jon's tip for the archery, but there were few northerners in this fight. The mountain, Tyrion said, getting a grimace from both Jaime and Jon. Jon here, however, seems to reckon the Red Priest is the one to watch out for. Isn't that right, Jon? His brother added. Aye. The man was the first through the gates at Pike, and he wields a flaming sword. Even if his skill isn't as much as others, that's going to be a big advantage. Jaime nodded while catching his uncle's smirk. He and Jon had become very close due in a large part to Joy and the boy's own nature, making him easy to befriend. Winning the gold had Gerion singing his praises. God help us if Thoros wins, he thought as he smiled. Margaery sat with her family, Garland and Loras, barely able to contain their excitement over the upcoming melee. She wasn't as keen on it as she was the joust or the squire's duels. She looked around the crowd and saw the king and queen sitting there. The king looked as excited as her brothers as he began to drink, while the queen wore her usual bored expression. Is that what it's like being a queen? Sitting there bored out of your mind while your husband drinks and gets excited over mock battles, she thought to herself. Almost the entire nobility of Westeros were here watching on. She saw the Tullys and the Arryns sitting together, the family bonds apparently still meaning something. The Lords of the Reach were spread all around her family, her uncle Paxter sitting with her grandfather's contingent, and Lord Tarly, as usual, sitting on his own. Apart from the few Northerners and the lack of the Dornish, everyone important had come to revel while pretending to pay respects to the old lion. The Lannisters sat in pride of place beside the king, and she knew it irked her grandmother that they hadn't had their chance to get closer to him and his son yet, although as she looked at the boy, she was reminded of the bored expression Cersei wore. The four Lannister men sat closely together, although she noticed the older Uncle Kevin kept more to his own company. Jaime, Gerion, and Tyrion all seemed to be much happier than the older man. As she looked at them, she noticed Jon sitting there with them, his face beaming as he smiled and joked along with the lions. She felt herself smile involuntarily. His face really came alive when he was like this, she thought. The boy was an enigma to her grandmother, who couldn't understand why his father let his squire for Lord Jaime, or why Jaime would want him to, looking on at the four of them. Margaery could see how at ease they were. Perhaps that was the reason in of itself. A stag for your thoughts, sis, Loras said, moving beside her. Sorry, what's that? Never mind, you seem to be elsewhere. Sorry, Loras. You know I'm not a fan of melees. Looking forward to the feast tonight then, sis? Not as much as grandmother, she said, making them both laugh. Her grandmother had been delighted when Tyrion had come to visit earlier with the invitation to sit at the high table with the king, although when Tyrion said his brother would like to meet with them after the melee, it had stirred the thorns her grandmother was famous for. Still, she too was looking forward to wearing one of the many new dresses she had brought along for such an occasion. Wylis. Sir Wylis stood by as his squire readied his charger, the horse bedecked in bright green, the aquamarine figure of the merman prominent. His armor was polished to a glimmering sheen, his helm in his hand while he waited for the squire to finish his work. Some of the very best warriors of the realm would take part in this tourney, and Sir Wylis was eager to prove his might. The rules were simple, even though it was a fight on foot. Those who wished would ride their horses to the grounds, something most had chosen to do. He mounted the horse, and his squire handed him back his helm. The young man looked as eager for the event as he was, and no doubt was looking forward to his own outing in the duels. "All is well, sir." "Aye, that it is young Arthos." He rode the horse out towards where the rest of the knights and lords were gathering, eager for the procession to begin and the fighting to start, his squire walking alongside him with a proud look on his face. He liked the lad and was grateful his wife had recommended her cousin's boy for the position. The lad was dutiful and honest and had some talent with the sword which he was keen to develop. He was also good-natured and liked to joke, something Wireless appreciated. "Sir Jorah, 'tis good to see you on this fine morn." "Aye, you too, Sir Wireless. I'm eager to show these southerners what Northmen can do." "That's the spirit. These boys of summer won't know what hit them when winter comes." The two men laughed as they received scowls from some of the others. Sandor sat on his horse and waited. He cared not what these other fools thought about the damned tourney or how they celebrated winning before even fighting. For him, he had one goal, one objective, and as he sat there, he finally saw him ride in. The destrier he was on was twice as large as most of the horses around her. She needed to be just to carry the large weight on her back. His brother looked around and angrily glowered at the assembled men. "It's me you need to worry about," Brother Sandor thought to himself as the men arrived to lead the procession. The horses began to ride towards the melee arena, the crowd excitedly cheering as they saw them. Sandor kept his eyes on his target. A tourney was his best chance. Accidents happen, and unlike his brother, he didn't have Lannister lords protecting his guilt. "Your graces, my lords and ladies, men and women, I welcome you all to today's event. The melee, 50 men will fight for the right to be proclaimed the champion and the prize of 25,000 gold dragons." The crowd cheered excitedly at the herald's announcement. "We are lucky to have such notable warriors as Sir Lyle Crakehall, the Strongbow, Bronzeon Royce, Sir Brynden Tully the Blackfish, Sir Jorah Mormont, knighted by the king himself," the herald said, whipping up the crowd as the sum of those mentioned waved. "Sir Wireless Manderly, Lord Jason Mallister, Sir Ryman Frey, Thoros of Myr, Sandor Clegane, and of course, the mountain that rides Sir Gregor Clegane." The crowd booed at the last name, and the man just scowled at them, forcing some of them to turn away. Finally, the procession reached the middle of the arena. The men turned and bowed to the king and queen and began to dismount, their squires and attendants quickly rushing to take the horses from the field. The herald turned to the crowd and acknowledged the king and queen before continuing. "My lords, good sirs, the fight is to a yield. Those who deliberately set out injure an opponent once he's yielded will be dealt with severely. When the remaining two competitors are left dueling, rules apply. If neither of the two men yield, the king will declare a winner or a draw. Now I wish you all the best. Let the melee commence." Jon sat there at the edge of his seat. His excitement was palpable. He had never seen such a grouping of men ready to fight before. The fact that some were amongst the very best the realm had to offer made it even more significant. He searched for the Northman he knew. Sir Jorah was wearing a dark grey, flat-topped great helm. His armor looked strong and sturdy, and his shield was embossed with the familiar black bear his family was so proud of. But for Jon, all of that paled into insignificance. When he saw the sword he wielded, he heard the gasps of the crowd when he had unsheathed it, and he too had been stunned. Valyrian steel glistened like no other blade. It shined and shimmered in the light, and Jon was awestruck as he looked upon it. "Is that Valyrian steel?" Tyrion said, turning to him. "Aye, Longclaw, House Mormont's ancestral blade," Jon said, noticing both Gerion and Jaime were looking at it appreciatively. The melee itself commenced quickly. Once the blades were drawn, and Jon's attention quickly went back to the field, he watched as Thoros' blade lit up the fire, glowing green and otherworldly as people moved out of his way. On the field, Bronzeon and the Blackfish faced off while Lyle Crakehall tried his luck against the mountain. Jon groaned at the sound of the mountain's great sword as it clashed against the Strongbow's much smaller one. Sandor moved quickly through the men. He'd made a Riverlands knight yield quickly and had beaten the Stormlands. Man who tried to catch him unawares, he saw his brother and Crakehall fight and was willing to bide his time when a man of his own size appeared in his path. "So you're a Clegane, a little smaller than the mountain, but you'll do, Roland Storm, the bastard of Knightsong, at your service." Sandor said nothing and just attacked. The boy was big in size but green. You don't talk during a fight, you fight. He swung his sword heavily down, almost catching the boy unaware. He was quick though, and he moved out of the way, bringing his sword up to parry. Sandor was ready for that and quickly pulled his sword back, confusing the young man. Before he had time to readjust, Sandor was on him. The first blow just grazed him, but the second caught him flush on the shoulder as he tried to recover. Sandor raised his sword and caught him across the helm, knocking the boy to the floor. He quickly placed the sword at the boy's neck, forcing him to yield. "Next time, don't bloody speak, kid," he growled before moving towards his brother. Bronze Jon Royce lived for this, fighting a worthy opponent, a crowd cheering your every move, while there was no better feeling than fighting a man in battle. This came a close second. Sir Brynden was as tough as they came, and Jon didn't know if he could win. But that made the fight even more enjoyable. Win or lose, he'd remember his fight against the Knight of the Bloody Gate for a long time. "Tiring yet, Blackfish?" "No, Jon. I could do this for hours." The man laughed before his face suddenly got serious. Brynden nodded at him and signaled behind him with another man. He may worry it was a trap, a feint. But Brynden was far too honorable for such a thing, so he looked to see a damn fray sneaking up on him. Quickly he turned, and before the man could react, both him and the Blackfish were upon him. Ryman never had a chance, and yielded quickly, both men having easily got past his guard and hitting him with painful blows. He turned back to Sir Brynden and smiled as they began their dance once more. Neither man would win this melee. They knew that now. Their fight would take too much out of them, so they gave it their all instead. Loras barely knew which way to look. There were so many interesting battles happening out on the field. He and Garland had laughed at the beating Sir Ryman had taken. As he sat there, he saw his brother was equally engrossed while he was watching Bronze Jon and Sir Brynden. His brother seemed more intent on watching Thoros as he faced Lord Mallister. "One day I'll be out there, brother," he said as Garland smiled at him. "Well, I hope Thoros won't be. Your face is way too pretty to be burned, brother," Garland japed, causing him to redden in embarrassment. Loras heard the crowd gasp and turned to see what it was that caused it. He saw the mountain had beaten the strongbow and seemed to be eager to finish the man before his brother quickly appeared and faced him. "Sandor! It's time, brother!" Sandor's voice shouted out as the two blades quickly began to move. Loras had never seen anything like it. The ferocity of the two men was scary. The swords clashed and the sounds rang around the arena, neither man giving an inch. The mountain was clearly the stronger of the two, but Hound had him beat on speed. He watched as the two men put everything into their swings, the Hound piercing the mountains. Guard suddenly sent the crowd into an uproar, but though the blow was fierce, it didn't seem to affect the mountain at all. The Blackfish. Brynden finally got the better of their exchanges. He could feel Jon's strikes lose their potency, and his own started to land easier. He caught the Lord hard across the side and noticed the man wince. He feinted to the left, and as Jon moved to parry quickly, he suddenly changed the arc of the sword and caught the Vale Lord flush across the helm. Jon dropped to his knee, his sword hanging loosely in his hand, dazed and confused. He could only watch as the sword was brought to his throat. "Do you yield, old friend?" "Aye. You win, Brynden. The day is yours." Brynden helped him up and nodded as the man made his way towards the exit. He hadn't had a fight that stimulating since he and the Bold took on melees during the War of the Ninepenny Kings. He turned to overlook those who were left seeing his brother's bannerman in a tough fight with Thoros and the two Northerners battle it out, while the Clegane brothers engaged in their own internal battle. 6, soon to be 3, he thought. He smirked. A little rest would do his old bones good. The hand of the king, the hand of the king. Jon Arryn had watched the fight between Lord Jon and Sir Brynden with great appreciation. To see two men of the Vale fight so well filled him with pride. Sure, Tully was a Riverlander, but his home was now the Vale, and he was family, so Jon was doubly satisfied with the result. He looked to the king, who was looking on with great eagerness. They had argued the night before when Robert had wanted to fight in the melee himself, but he had talked him out of it, and the king huffed and sat grumbling like the child he used to be for the rest of the night. Jon's attention was drawn to where the Lannisters were sitting. The meeting they had was a disaster. No longer funding the crown was going to cause a large shortfall. Thankfully, the repayment schedule the younger Lannister had proposed was much easier to manage than the one under Tywin. But without their funds, it really left only the Tyrells to bankroll them, and Jon knew what the cost of that would be. As he looked, he noticed how at ease Ned's son was among the Lannisters. It surprised him immensely that Ned would allow his bastard squire for Jaime Lannister of all people, but there was no doubting the boy seemed both welcomed and appreciated by Lord Jaime and his family. The boy seemed more a ward than a page or squire, and that stirred Jon's memories of the two boys he'd fostered all those years ago. He hoped the lad turned out more like his father than his other ward. Shrieks from the crowd forced his attention back to the field. Sandor was tiring his swings, becoming less and less effective. His brother was relentless, but he too was swinging more wildly than he had been. Seeing an opening, Sandor used all his remaining reserves and increased his pace. He swung high to the left, forcing his brother to pivot slightly. He parried the blow his brother gave in return, but did so ineffectively, allowing his brother to assume he was open. As Gregor swung high, Sandor ducked and caught him across the knee. Hearing a growl from his brother, he swung with even more might, hitting the knee once again. He almost yelled out in happiness when he saw his brother fall to the ground. Giving no quarter, Sandor was on him in a flash. A hard blow across the chest was followed by one to the left of his brother's helm. Before Gregor could recover from that, Sandor swung with all his might, hitting his brother's shoulder and forcing his brother's large spade-like great sword to fall to the ground. "Yield, brother, it's over," I said. "Yield," Sandor yelled, pushing his blade close to his brother's throat. Finally, after what seemed like an age, his brother nodded. "Aye, yield." Sandor almost smiled. He was that happy. He turned and walked away, eager to face whoever was next. After beating his brother, he felt ready to face anyone. With his back turned, however, he didn't see Gregor rise to his feet and regain his sword, nor did he see him charge towards him. He did, however, hear the shrieks of the crowd, and when he realized what was happening, he tried to turn, knowing he'd be too late. But the blow never came. Instead, a longsword parried his brother's attack. Sandor was surprised to see the man who had come to his aid, the Blackfish, and he had crossed paths a few times, and every time he was left in no doubt of the man's disdain. But here he was, more than likely saving his life. And Sandor couldn't help but feel grateful. He joined in with the man's parries of his brother's sword. "E-N-O! Guards!" Lord Jaime's voice boomed across the arena. "Clegane! Stand down!" Jaime shouted as the guards quickly entered and surrounded the three men still locked in a deadly fight. Gregor felt the blow on his side from the Blackfish's attack, followed quickly by one from his brother on his arm. He heard the shouting of his liege and saw the guards come towards him. 5, 10, now 20, all heavily armored. He glowered at his brother, and the man who'd cost him his prize. He lowered his sword and took a knee. "Next time, brother, it won't just be your face," he said as he rose and was escorted from the arena by all 25 of the guards who'd made it inside. It took a few moments for the mountain to be removed, giving each of the last 6 remaining men a chance to rest. When the guards had left, Lord Jaime proclaimed, the melee restarted. Sir Brynden stood facing Sandor, Sir Jorah opposite, Sir Wylis and Lord Jason squared off against Thoros, who'd used the opportunity to change swords. As the men turned to each other, a green flame appeared on Thoros' sword, and the fight began in earnest. Jon watched as the mountain had been removed. The man had no honor. Jon knew that, but to see him try to attack his own brother from behind, if it hadn't been for the Blackfish, then Sandor Clegane would be dead. And Jon shuddered at the thought of it. How Lord Jaime could have such a man in his service confused Jon. The Jaime he knew was honorable and good. Something didn't make sense. He wondered if he should speak with him later, but dismissed the thought. If Jaime wanted to tell him, he would. Well, that was fun. Gerion japed, making them all laugh, relieving the tension. "What was Clegane thinking?" Tyrion grumbled. "Told you not to put your money on him?" Gerion quipped, causing Tyrion to frown. "Well, Jon, we're still in with a chance," Gerion said, nudging him on the shoulder. "Quiéreme." Jaime, though, had his eyes fixed firmly on the Crown Prince. The boy had a disappointed look on his face, as if he wished the mountain hadn't been stopped. It disturbed him greatly. Ares used to have the very same look when he planned something vile. The king was deep into his cups. He had been practically sober when this started, and now barely 2 hours in, and he was almost falling down drunk. He noticed Jon Arryn's face was as disappointed as his was disgusted while looking at the king. "Serves you right, Falcon. This was the man you raised, the man you thought would make a good king. I won't make the same mistake as you. My king is already a better man than yours ever will be. The Blackfish." Brynden wasn't going to win this fight. The Hound was younger and stronger, and he had more energy reserves than he did. But fight he did, and perhaps his greater skill could do what his weaker body could not. The two swords flashed forward, meeting in the middle with a large bang, the vibrations of the hit traveling straight up his arm and almost causing him to lose his grip. He tried to feint, but the Hound was ready for it. The man quickly brought his sword down in a furious swing, catching him across the wrist. It was no use. He lost his grip, his sword, and the fight. "I yield," he said as the sword was brought to his chest. "Well fought, sir," the Hound said respectfully. "You two, I wish you good fortune in the fights to come," Brynden said as he nodded. Sandor watched the man pick his sword and walk away, the crowd cheering in the background. He looked to see Thoros about to beat the Lannister Lord and saw the flames of the crazy priest's sword. He wanted no part of it, so instead moved to where the two Northmen were locked in a furious fight. He'd take the winner and hoped Thoros jumped in. Perhaps then, he and the Northmen could take the Red Priest out. The Bear Knight Ser Jorah was surprised at the intensity the merman fought with. He knew Sir Wylis was skilled, but he had thought the man would tire quickly. After taking out a few of the lesser fighters very easily, he found himself across from his fellow Northerner. He had thought this would be over just as quickly. But they'd been fighting for almost an hour, including the resting time while the mountain was removed. He pushed forward, increasing the speed and ferocity of his swings as Sir Wylis's parries became less effective. He thrust his sword towards the larger man's chest, but quickly, as Sir Wylis moved to protect himself, he pulled the sword halfway back to him and in a short swing caught him across the arm, the contact sending a shudder right up his own arm. He saw the wince the other man gave. It had hurt for sure, without giving him a chance to move away. Jorah quickly swung again, catching Wylis high on his shoulder. The move was unexpected, and it left no time to recover. As he saw his hand quiver, he quickly struck again, catching him across the wrist of his sword hand. The blow was strong and powerful, and he watched as the sword fell. "Do you yield, Sir Wylis?" he asked, his sword pointing at the man's heart. "Aye, the day is yours, Ser Jorah. Good fortune to you, my friend," Sir Wylis said with a smile as he picked his sword up and began to leave the arena. Jorah didn't even get the chance to rest before the Hound was upon him, the strike of the sword almost catching him unawares as he barely managed to block it. He turned into his stance and faced the taller man. "So it begins," he said as the blades crashed together. "The bold." The Red Priest was relentless. His sword moved like it was an extension of his arm. His strokes seemed wild and uncoordinated to those who were ignorant of battle. But for Barristan it was a dance, and Thoros was a master at it. The flames on the sword only made it even more like art, as they seemed to almost come alive as the sword moved. Lord Jason had done well to continue for this long, but as he watched him tire, Barristan began to worry for the man. Melees had rules, and serious injuries were actually pretty rare, but when dealing with a flaming sword, even one mistake could be fatal. He watched as the priest swung low and high. Wide arcs and short thrusts, feints and parries, and the Riverland Lord's resistance began to fade. Jaime Lannister had once said that Sir Barristan was an artist who painted only in red. Well, if that was the case, he just found one whose color was green. The sword came crashing down, the flames growing higher. Lord Jason tried to move back, but it was too late. And as Sir Barristan watched the flame get close to the man's face, he shuddered. It ended without injury, though. Lord Jason, in moving backwards to avoid the flames, had slipped, and within seconds had yielded as Thoros pointed the flaming sword at this chest. "Now that's a fight, eh, Barristan?" the king drunkenly said. "Aye, your grace, a fine fight indeed," he replied. "So who's left?" the king asked, and Barristan squirmed. "Was the man that damn drunk?" "Ser Jorah, the Hound, and Thoros, your grace," responded as the king drained his tankard and nodded to his squire for more. Barristan looked from the field around the crowd, not checking for threats, but more to see who was engaged and who not. Mace Tyrell was surrounded by his lords and was speaking animatedly, no doubt explaining his own martial prowess, though he possessed none. Sir Brynden had sat back among his family. His old friend had done well, and the fight with Bronze Jon had stirred memories of their times together. He looked up to see Jaime Lannister sitting with his family, all of them laughing and joking at something the young lad was saying. He looked closer at the young boy. Ned Stark's bastard squiring for Jaime Lannister had caused a bit of a stir, and Sir Barristan couldn't understand the reason for it. As he watched him, the boy turned so he was almost facing him, his dark grey eyes catching the light, causing him to blink before it was gone. Was that purple he saw? No. It must have been the light, he thought, as he watched the older Lannister uncles nudge the boy, as the boy smiled back at them. Barristan's heart almost stopped. The fight was down to the last 3 people. Ser Jorah and the Hound were fighting each other, and Thoros had thrown down his sword and moved to his final one. He took a large swallow from his wineskin, the cool liquid refreshing him as he swallowed. He turned and grabbed the last bottle of wildfire. The fight between the 2 men would be over soon, and he'd be ready for the winner. Sandor was tired. Very tired. But compared to the man he was fighting, he was in much better shape. The 2 had only been fighting for 5 minutes or so, but the power both put behind their blows had taken their toll. It wouldn't be long now, he thought as he swung again. His blow caught the other man flat-footed and gave him the opening he needed. It took him just 3 more strikes, and the fight was over. All 3 had hit home, and Sandor knew they'd bruise, but it could be worse in a real fight. Jorah would have lost an arm. He placed his sword at the Northerner's throat. "I yield," the man said as he nodded at him. "Well fought, Clegane." Ser Jorah said, a note of respect in his voice. He turned and left the arena, turning back to see Thoros' sword light up yet again. Better you than me, he thought as he looked at the Hound before leaving. Thoros moved quickly once the fight was done. He lit his sword and approached as fast as he could. As he closed the distance, the Hound turned, and Thoros saw it in his eyes. Fear. This would be easy, he thought, as the 2 men faced each other. "Keep that damn fire away from me, priest. I'm afraid I can't comply. Clegane, my lord commands me, not you. Touch me with that damn fire and you'll be seeing your lord sooner than you planned." "If that's R'hllor's will, then so be it, shall we?" Thoros said as he moved to swing the sword. Sandor moved away from the flaming sword, all thoughts and battle plans gone in that moment, replaced by one simple overriding concern. Don't get burned. Don't get burned. He barely parried the first stroke, and when the second one hit his arm, his instincts kicked in. He dropped the sword from his other hand and quickly went to put the flames out. "Yield? I yield," Sandor said, relieved that the flames hadn't caught. The crowd cheered as Thoros was declared the winner, the flames on his sword finally gone out as he bowed and waved. Jon looked to Gerion and smiled while Tyrion looked on grumpily. Jaime just laughed. Who was Jon going to pick in the joust, he wondered. The feast was almost ready to begin, just a procession of the king and queen to come to get things started. Jon was sat beside some of the sons and daughters of the more important lords. There had almost been a fight between Jaime and Kevan when it was decided, but Jaime refused to back down. If Jon couldn't sit at the high table, he'd sit in an equally important place, and that was it. If the Tyrells weren't sat at the high table, Jon knew Jaime would have insisted he sat there, and Jon couldn't help but admire Jaime for it. He looked around the table. The 2 Tyrell boys and their sister were sat opposite him. Lancel and the Red Wine boys sat at the end of the table, which Jon was glad of, none of them being his favorite people. The 2 Royce boys sat together talking to 2 lads from the Stormlands that Jon didn't know the names of. There were a group of girls from the Riverlands who'd almost been put as far away from Jon as possible at the Tully's request, and he sighed. Obviously, it wasn't just Catelyn who hated him. The doors opened and the procession began. The king and queen at the front, both looking like they'd prefer to be elsewhere. Jaime accompanying Lady Olenna, followed by Lord Mace and his wife. Lord Arryn walked alone slowly behind them, while Tyrion walked with an uncomfortable, very beautiful blonde woman. A Hightower, he thought, followed by Gerion and his sister Genna, and lastly by Kevan and his wife, Lady Dorna. They made their way to the high table and took their seats, allowing all of those present to do the same. "Finally, I thought they'd take forever," Garland said with a smile. "Grandmother looks happy," the younger Tyrell, Loras said. "Well, as happy as she ever is," he added before his sister gave him an admonishing glare. "Lord Jaime was very gallant in accompanying her, don't you think so, Jon?" Margaery said, a lopsided smile on her face. Jon almost gulped when he realized he was being spoken to. He looked to Margaery and could see the amusement in her eyes, although he noticed it wasn't a mean or spiteful sort of amusement. "Aye, Lord Jaime is very gallant, Lady Margaery. Just Margaery." The smile even warmer now. "Of course, just Margaery," Jon replied before they both broke out in laughter. Garland and Loras looked on in confusion as the two of them continued to laugh before Margaery turned to them. "A private joke, Marge?" Garland asked. "Not private. When we met Jon, I called him Lord Jon. He insisted he was just Jon. Although later when I met him again, his young lady insisted he had a different name," she said, and looked at Jon with her eyebrow raised. "Jon," Jon said, causing both of them to laugh once again. Both Garland and Loras turned to each other and then back to their sister and Lord Jaime's page, neither understanding what the other found so funny. "So, where is young Joy tonight? Did she not accompany you?" Margaery asked, getting her laughter under control. "No, my lady. It's way past her bedtime, and once she's heard her story, she's out like a light." "Are you the storyteller, then?" Garland interjected, a small smirk on his face. "Aye, my lord," Jon said sheepishly as he glanced at the still smiling Margaery. "What did you think of the melee, Jon?" Loras asked. "It was good, my lord. Made me eager for the duels. Jon, he's Loras, my brother's Garland, and I'm Margaery. If we can call you by your name, then you should do the same." "It wouldn't be proper, my lady," Jon replied. "It would if we wished it, Jon," she said determinedly. "You better listen to her, Jon. When my sister makes her mind up, it's better to just go along with her," Garland quickly added. "Especially when I'm right," Margaery said softly, hitting her brother on the shoulder. Jon sat there with a smile on his face. He looked to the end of the table where Lancel and the horrible twins were shooting daggers at him before he looked back to Margaery and her brothers. Loras and Garland were both talking excitedly to each other, but she was looking at him, that lopsided grin on her face, and his smile immediately grew larger. "Jaime." Jaime sat at the high table beside Lady Olenna, the king sitting to his right, already beginning to get drunk while his sister sat there fuming. Lord Mace and Lord Arryn were in intense discussion, much to the chagrin of Lady Olenna by his side, and it would have made Jaime smile if his attention wasn't captured by the events at Jon's table. He looked down to see Jon in rapt attention while Lady Margaery spoke to him, his young charge hanging on every word, and it reminded him of himself when he was younger and how Cersei could make the room disappear when she spoke to him. He smiled and turned to the lady beside him, deciding to have some fun. "Your granddaughter seems to be enjoying herself, Lady Olenna. Was it your idea to place a bastard at my granddaughter's table, Lord Jaime?" The women scowled at him. "Jon is an honorable lad, my lady. As my page, my duty is to place him in a position worthy of him," he said, annoyance clear in his voice. "And a table with his betters is worthy of him." "Jon has no betters, my lady. You think very highly of the boy, Lord Jaime." "I do, my lady. Jon is a remarkable young man." "In spite of his birth?" she asked leadingly. "No, my lady, because of it," Jaime said, noticing the surprised look the woman gave him. Jaime decided to change the subject before he said more than he wanted to. He needed to get the woman's focus on something else. "I wish to discuss some matters with you, my lady, when you have the time." "Oh, and what matters are those, my lord? Relations between the Reach and the West have never been, how shall I put it, cordial." "Indeed. Lord Jaime, they haven't. Your father always felt, what was he said? Oh yes, that we reached afar." "My father was a man often blind to his own faults." "And you, my lord," Olenna said mockingly. "Oh me, I'm well aware of my faults, my lady." The two of them looked intently at each other, Olenna's look moving from suspicion to intrigued before finally settling on curiosity. Good Jaime thought curiosity was a good thing, as long as it was directed at him and not Jon. Barristan. Sir Barristan watched the room for threats, but every so often his eyes were drawn to the dark-haired young boy at the lower table. The boy was eagerly engaged in conversations with the Tyrell children, both boys seemingly peppering the boy for information regarding the duels, while the young lady asking questions about Joy, which Barristan found odd. What would a young boy know about Joy? When he saw him earlier, his attention had been drawn to the boy, his frowns, his curious looks, his eyes, and that smile. Something about that smile had made his heart almost stop. Whatever it was, he couldn't quite place it. But there was something familiar about it. As he watched the boy, he again felt like he knew him, like he should know him. It was like something on the edge of his mind, and Barristan was annoyed with himself that he couldn't place it. "Of course, Lord. Hand. Anyway, my family can help. We'll gladly do so." Barristan heard Lord Tyrell's voice, and it grated on him. "I thank you, Lord Tyrell. The Crown will of course be very grateful." Drunk again, groping the serving girls while his wife sat there disgusted. This was not a man worth serving, not like his prince would have been. A man worth serving. Was he doomed never to find one? Jorah. Jorah sat beside Sir Wylis. He had done well today, both had, but the drunk priest was crazy, he thought as he looked at the man. Thoros had been unstoppable. The Hound had found out to his cost, and Jorah was glad he hadn't faced the fiery blade himself. He turned to look at the high table. There she was, the most beautiful woman Jorah had ever seen, his breath caught in his throat. Was she looking at him? Surely not. He nodded to her all the same, and when she smiled, his heart felt like it would burst from his chest. "Isn't that right, Sir Jorah?" The jovial tone of Wylis interrupted his gazing. "Sorry, Wyle, what was that?" "I was saying that today's fight was one for the tales. 2 Northmen evenly matched fighting for an hour or more." "Aye, Sir Wylis, it was. You fought like a true warrior, and I was lucky to take the day." He raised his tankard and crashed it against the other man's. "The North remembers," he said loudly. "Aye, the North remembers," Sir Wylis replied before they both laughed loudly. Tyrion sat at the table, his head pounding and his uncle being his usual annoying self. All right, so Gerion wasn't actually annoying, but by the 7 did the man truly ratchet things up when people were hungover. Gerion never seemed to suffer the morning after sickness, not due to lack of drinking. Tyrion knew, and if his uncle had a secret, well then he kept it to himself. "Cheer up, Tyrion. Here, drink this," Gerion said, handing him a small cup. "What is it?" "Trust me, nephew." Tyrion just nodded and emptied the cup. It took only a minute or so before he felt his stomach begin to churn. He looked to his smiling uncle as if to say, "Why me?" before he quickly jumped up and ran for the privy, passing Jon on his way out of the door, the look of surprise on the boy's face almost enough to make him laugh. Running as quick as his stunted legs would carry him, he made it just in time, opening the door. His stomach emptied as he got inside. Within a moment or two he was fine. His stomach stopped churning and he felt somewhat better. He left the privy and headed back to the hall, each step making him feel more like himself. By the time he reached the table and drank a cup of water, his sickness and headache had passed. "What was in that cup, Uncle?" "Just a remedy I picked up," Gerion said, his ever-present smirk on his face. "We should market it, Uncle. It'd make us rich." "Tyrion, we are rich," his uncle said, nudging Jon. "Well, richer then. Uncle Gerion's morning elixir." Jon looked on in amusement as Tyrion tried to convince Gerion to either give him the recipe or to make some more. He broke his fast on the small oatcake and placed one in his pack for later. After they broke their fast, he and Tyrion would be riding to Lannisport for a meeting with Sir Wylis, and Jon was nervous. Setting up the meeting was easy, but actually helping Tyrion negotiate was not something he looked forward to. Jaime was putting a lot of faith in him, and the thoughts of letting him down worried him. He looked to see Tyrion was waiting for him and quickly finished so they could get on their way. The meeting needed to be done early so Sir Wylis could prepare for the joust, and Jon was upset it would take his time away from Joy. "Will you be bringing Joy to the joust, Gerion?" he asked the older man. "I'm afraid not, Jon. The noise may be too much for her, and I worry if she saw a horse get hurt." "Of course, I'll try and pop in and see her before the joust then." "Thanks, lad. I'll let her know. No doubt she'll ask for you when I go see her." Jon nodded as he and Tyrion left. They quickly made their way to their horses, and despite Tyrion preferring to ride slowly, they instead rode quite hard to Lannisport. Once they reached the town, Aliers and Jaws handed off the horses, and they made their way to the tavern to meet Sir Wylis. They found the man sitting alone for once, his guards lounging against the wall. "Ah, Lord Tyrion, Jon, it's good to see you came so early. I worried you'd be late." "Of course not good. Sir, we wouldn't dream of it," Tyrion said, taking his seat. "So what can I do for you both?" "My brother sent me to discuss a trading arrangement with you, Sir Wylis." "Trading, Lord Tyrion? I'm not aware we have such an arrangement," the man said, confused. "Indeed not, Sir Wylis. But I think that Lord Jaime and Lord Tyrion would like to rectify that situation," Jon added quickly. "So what items would you like to trade?" Wood and ships, my lord, as well as discuss mutually beneficial trading routes. Tyrion said before Jon handed him a couple of pieces of paper. We have ore and minerals, good craftsmanship and weapon making, and our own trading centers to help develop trade further, Tyrion added as he looked over the papers. The two men spoke for over an hour with no agreement even close to being entertained, let alone agreed to. Sir Wylis seemed distrustful of the Lannister motives, and Tyrion was on the verge of blowing up every time the man questioned them. Look at Wylis. I don't know what else I can say to you, Tyrion said, the exasperation clear in his voice. Aye, my lord, not sure what there is to say. You two are behaving like idiots, Jon said, stunning the two men. Careful, Snow. You may be my liege lord's son, but that doesn't give you the right. The right to what good, sir? Point out idiocy when it's clearly being shown in front of me, Jon said angrily. Lord Tyrion and Lord Jaime are offering you something that your father and yourself would jump at normally. This deal allows for your family to make a great profit. It's larger than almost any deal you have at present, am I right? Aye, Snow. That's true, but a deal with the Lannisters is not one my father would go for, Wylis said, noticing the angry look Tyrion shot him. And why is that, sir? Jon asked, placing his hand on Tyrion's arm and shaking his head. How can we trust them? Snow, you know what the North thinks of them. Sir Wylis, what does the Reach think of your family? Jon said, catching the man off guard. When you came north, what did the North think of them? Jon quickly added. But my father always said Lord Wyman is the smartest man in the North, and his lealness is unquestioned, Jon said, noticing the look of pride in Wylis's face. Aye, he is that, Jon, but what has that got to do with this? Sir Wylis, your family was once unwelcome in the Reach and suspected in the North, but the word of the Starks was good enough for that to be forgotten, and now you're treated with the respect your family is due. No one dare says a Manderly is not to be respected lest my father hear of it. Aye. Wylis said, his chest puffed out. I may not carry my family's name, Sir Wylis, but the blood of the Starks runs through these veins. Is that not so? It is, Jon. Let there be no doubt of that, Wylis said with a nod of his head. The Lannisters have treated me with nothing but care and respect. My father trusted Lord Jaime, as do I. He is not his father. Sir, he is a different man, a better man, and knowing that, and then turning down this deal is not what I'd expect from Lord Wyman's heir. You shame me, Jon, Wylis said with a look of embarrassment. Not my intention, Sir Wylis. I just wanted you to know that like the Manderlys when they came north, the Lannisters are worthy of a second chance also. Very well. I shall take this to my father. I'll recommend we sign it and let this deal bring our families and regions closer together, Wylis said as he picked up his tankard and watched Tyrion do the same. To the north and the west, Tyrion said as he cracked his tankard against Wylis's. Jorah. Jorah walked over to his horse. Its caparison was his house colors and sigil, the black bear covering both sides of the horse. He looked down to the smoke-gray ribbon tied to his hand and smiled, the thoughts of crowning the woman who gave it to him clear in his mind. She had surprised him by accepting his offer of a dance, and even more so by giving him her favor. My lady, would you honor me by giving me your favor? I would, my lord. You would crown me then. My lady, I can think of no one else more deserving of the title than you, not even the queen. You would be the only queen I'd ever serve, my lady. His squire helped him mount the horse and make his way to the arena. He would be jousting first, facing Lord Jason Lannister in the first round, a formidable opponent, and one more experienced than he was. But Lord Jason didn't carry a favor from a beauty like Lynessy, and would fall today. Of that, Jorah was sure. As he finally made it to the tiltyard, he looked to the stands and saw her smiling at him. He picked up the lance and moved to the end of the run, looking down to see Lord Jason at the other end. Your graces, my lords and ladies, welcome to round one of the joust. Our first two competitors representing the Riverlands, Lord Jason Lannister, and representing the North, Sir Jorah Mormont. The crowd cheered as they were introduced. Jorah raised his lance and faced down the tiltyard. At the herald's order, the horses began to charge. His lance hit dead center in Lannister's shield, forcing the other man to stumble but not fall. He barely even felt the hit from Lannister. He made his way back and his squire handed him another lance, kicking his horse into gear. He charged yet again. This time the lance hit true, and he watched as Lord Mallister was unseated. "Victory to Ser Jorah!" the herald announced to cheers. As Jorah sought her out in the crowd, he saw her smiling at him, and his heart lifted. Jaime sat watching as the jousts continued. He was itching to be out there, but his uncle was right as host. There was no way he could compete. Still, it rankled him to see those competing when he knew he was better than most, if not all of them. He watched as Jon Royce beat the Blackfish and as Thoros fell to Lyle Craighall, but he felt himself stir as he watched the mountain make his way to the Tillyard. Gregor Clegane was a man Jaime would like to kill with his bare hands. What he'd done, what his father had sent him to do, sickened him, and the thoughts of him walking around as a knight after his axe shamed Jaime. He wanted to kill him but stayed his hand. The mountain was not his to kill. He turned from the joust where Barristan was lining up to look at Jon, whose glaring at the mountain mirrored his own. No. Barristan. Barristan felt the muscles of his horse stir beneath him as he kicked it into gear. The firm ride focused him on the beast in front of him. He could raise his lance and no one would know, he thought as he neared the middle of the alley. No, I'd know. He lined his lance and struck good and true, but the mountain did not fall. He rode back quickly and took another lance. Lining himself up, yet again he charged, as before. The lance hit true, and as before he barely moved the mountain. Luckily, the man's own lance work was average at best, and Barristan barely felt the lance scrape off his shield. They lined up for a third time. The breathing of their horses could almost be heard by the crowd, Barristan's horse faring much better than his opponent's, his weight a much easier burden than the colossal mountains. He shifted in his saddle slightly to the left as he lined his lance, hitting Clegane square in the chest. He smiled as the mountain crashed to the ground. He didn't even bother to see if the man regained his footing, and just began to ride away when he heard a groan. Turning back, he saw the mountain tear his helm off and look at him. Did the man wish to carry this on with his sword? Apparently not, as he watched the mountain grimace and turned to walk away. Jon cheered louder than almost anyone in the crowd when he saw the mountain unhorsed by the bold himself, 2 knights, one the epitome of chivalry and the other the blackest of them all, and it brought Jon an immense amount of satisfaction to see Barristan victorious. "It'd be for the best if we set guards on Clegane later," Tyrion said as Jon turned to him. "Why?" he asked. "Clegane is a bad loser, Jon. Who knows what he'll get up to if he's not under escort," Gerion said while Tyrion nodded along. "Surely he wouldn't do anything here. This is his liege's land." "The mountains, a rabid dog. One day he'll bite even us," Tyrion whispered as he took a drink. "Then why keep him around? Clegane had his uses for my father, deplorable though they were. But Jaime's in charge now. Tyrion, why keep a monster like him now? Jon, it's complicated. What Clegane did, he did on my father's orders, so he didn't break any laws. He broke the laws of the gods, the laws of decency," Jon angrily said. "Aye, but he committed no crime in the eyes of the king. Believe me, there's nothing I'd like more than to see him suffer for what he did. But as of right now, there's nothing that can be done," Tyrion said, hoping to calm him down. Jon just nodded along. If in the eyes of the king the mountain was innocent, then that didn't speak well of the king himself. He looked up to where the king was spilling more of a tankard over himself than he was drinking. No? Jon thought this was not how a king should be. Jorah was furious. He'd beaten Hostine and Ryman Frey, and only a few moments ago dispatched Boros Blunt, and while Linesi had cheered him on for all of them, now, as he got ready to face Lyle Craighall, the man's brother Tybalt was speaking to her and making her laugh. He grabbed the lance from his squire and almost had his horse in motion before the signal was given. He charged down the field, his rage focused on the strongbow. The larger, stronger man should have proved a formidable challenge, but against an angry bear he was no match. The lance hit with such force that Lyle's own lance shot from his hand as he fell. The crowd gasped at the sound as he crashed to the ground. "Victory to Ser Jorah!" He heard the crowd cheer as Craighall staggered to his feet. Jorah nodded at the man, his rage dissipating as he turned his horse to leave. He looked to the stands and saw her looking at him, the look in her eyes one of lust, and he smiled. She motioned to his hand where her favor rested, and he knew it then. She was his. Olenna. Olenna sat beside her granddaughter, watching the joust excitedly. She had never been one who enjoyed the marital pursuits, but the news her son had given her the previous evening had filled her with glee. "Mother, we need to speak." "What have you done now, Mace?" "Nothing. Mother, I spoke with Lord Arryn." "I saw that. What does the old falcon want?" He asked for a learned mother for the crown. It seems they're in need of help to cover costs. "I'm not surprised given how this king spends. So how much does he want?" 300.00 gold dragons, Mother. Olenna had nearly choked on her wine. 300.00 gold dragons? Why the hell would they need that much? Surely the Lannisters would be willing to bail the crown out unless... Of course, the young lion wasn't being as cooperative as the old one. This was a huge opportunity. With the Lannisters out of the equation, they could take advantage. "And what did you tell them, Mace?" "That we'd be delighted to help, of course, for certain considerations." It was a rare occasion that Olenna felt pride in her son. Last night had been one of the few times. She looked at him sitting beside Lord Arryn and felt it again. "Are you enjoying the day, Grandmama?" "Very much so, my dear. Have you spoken to the prince yet?" "I have, but he's so young, Grandmother. He's uninterested in everything," Margaery said with a frown. "Of course, my dear, but it's important you engage him, even if he's too young to interest you." "I know. I'll do better." "I know you will, my dear. We have plenty of time." The joust day 2. Facing him was Jon Royce, and the man was like rock. He'd already broken 4 lances off the man, and nothing, not a budge. He lined up for the 5th tilt and raised his lance. The favor on his wrist waved in the air as he began to charge. The lance caught the man square and true, and while Jorah felt the hit, Jon had landed on him. He was sure his had done more damage, not enough to unseat the man. But it had hurt him, that was clear. He rode back and retrieved his 6th lance and lined up again. The two men faced each other down the length of the field, their horses straining to be set free. At the signal they rode, and the lances hit their marks. Jorah felt his shield fall from his hand. The force had been hit, almost tearing his arm from his shoulder. He looked to the rider, less hoarse, and realized he'd won. Jon was unhorsed and staggering to his feet. The cheers of the crowd were drowned out, though, as he looked to see the beaming smile on Lyness's face. Cersei was bored, incredibly bored, but worse than that, she was incredibly annoyed. Earlier in the day, she and Joff had bumped into the 2 bastards while breaking their fast. What had annoyed her so much was the fact that they were breaking theirs in the same place. The thought of it, bastards eating with royalty and in her very own home. What was her brother thinking? Not that her brother had been thinking clearly anyway. She had ordered the serving girl to have them removed, and the girl had looked at her like she had 2 heads. She'd have the girl whipped if she worked in the Red Keep. But here at Casterly Rock, it was her brother who was in charge, and that made her furious. So when the girl didn't remove the bastards, she sent Trant over to do so. "Out now, bastard, and take the other little bastard with you." "No, Jon no dasta." "What did you say to me, you little—" "I wouldn't finish that if I was you, sir," Jon angrily said as he stood up. "And why is that bastard?" "Because this young lady happens to Lord Gerion's daughter, Joy." "Joy," the girl said emphatically. "His bastard daughter. Now are you going to move, or do you want me to drag you out?" "You do, and it'll be the last thing you do, I promise you," Jon said, moving to the man. "What the hell are you doing, Trant?" Jaime's voice boomed as he entered the hall. "Getting these 2 bastards out of the Queen and Prince's company," Trant arrogantly replied. "You will leave this hall now, and are no longer welcome in my keep. Is that understood, Sir Meryn?" Jaime squared up to the now quivering man. "Who do you think you are, Kingslayer? I'm the Lord of Casterly Rock, the Warden of the West, and you will be removed from my presence either by your own feet or I'll have you carried out," Jaime said as his and Jon's guards entered the room. "What's going on here?" Sir Barristan said from the door. "I want this man out of here now, Sir Barristan. Either you do it or I will, but it will be done." "What the hell did you do, Sir Meryn?" Barristan shouted at the man. "I was following the Queen's orders. She wanted the bastards He never got to finish, the punch from Jaime knocking him to the floor. He jumped up and went for his sword, but immediately 5 swords were drawn and pointed at him. "Remove yourself, Sir Meryn. Find somewhere else to stay. I'll take this up with His Grace and Lord Arryn later," Barristan said as Trant was escorted from the room. Her husband had admonished her the queen. How dare he force her to eat with scum and then blame her for trying to right that wrong? The man was an oaf, a fool, and that bastard, who did he think he was? The nerve of him refusing his queen. Was that what Jaime was teaching him? Well, she wouldn't stand for it. Bad enough Jaime felt he could do it, but a lowly bastard. No, he'd need to learn his place. Jorah Barristan. Barristan dismounted to help the man up. Sandor Clegane had proved him wrong both in the melee and the joust. 4 lances he'd hit the man with all, flush in the chest, and in the end, he felt the man had slipped more than been thrown from his horse. The fall had done damage, though, his shoulder clearly hurting, and the man had accepted his hand to help him stand. The two nodded at each other, and Barristan went to ready himself for the final. Your graces, my lords and ladies, good men and women of the West, I now present to you the finalists of the joust, representing the crown, Sir Barristan the Bold, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. The cheers of the crowd were deafening. His opponent, representing the North, Sir Jorah Mormont, the Bear Knight. Jorah's cheers equally as loud. The two men sat on their horses beside each other. They nodded and made their way to their respective ends. Once they had received their lances, they turned and awaited the signal, this time coming from the king himself. Good knights, I wish you both good fortune. Begin, the king said before belching loudly and turning to his squire to fill his cup. The horses rode fast and with purpose. The lances held firm as they crashed together, both hitting off the shields. They turned and began once again with the same result, over and over. 4th tilt a hit from Sir Barristan, the 5th tilt a hit from Jorah, the 6th Jorah again. They lined up for the 7th time, both men clearly exhausted, and yet they rode towards each other once more. Jorah could feel the pain. His shoulder throbbed, his chest heaved, and yet he raised his lance and struck clean, catching the bolt across the chest. But the older man did not falter. He did not move at all. He simply turned and readied himself to ride once more, and Jorah almost collapsed. Was it a show? Was he not hurt? Did it matter? No, he thought, and he steadied himself to ride once more. Barristan had been in epic jousts before, none more epic than the one at Harrenhal. He had broken 6 lances before his prince had unhorsed him, and every time he thought of it, he wondered how different things would have been if he'd have been victorious. Would Ashara been happy being crowned by him? Would his prince now be king? He cleared his mind of the thoughts as his horse charged down the field. The lance feeling lighter in his hands than he thought possible, he struck and watched as Sir Jorah slipped but did not fall. He nodded to the man and lined up once more. As he rode past the pavilion, he looked to see the king, drunk as usual, to see the queen looking at everyone with disgust and her son looking like her mirror image. He turned to see Sir Jaime and his young squire watching him intently. The young man gave him a smile, and Sir Barristan almost fell from his horse. He looked at the boy again and saw the light reflect of his eyes. The dark grey, almost looking indigo, made him catch his breath. He rode and picked up his lance and shook his head, trying to clear it for the tilt to come. Jorah had almost fallen, everything he worked for almost coming to an end. He looked down to the ribbon on his wrist and steeled his resolve. This time, he thought as he began to ride down the alley, his eyes focused on the man who stood between him and his prize. He gave it his all. Every ounce of energy he had went into the stroke, and he was rewarded as Sir Barristan fell. Your graces, my lord and ladies, the winner of the joust, Sir Jorah Mormont. He ignored the cheering crowd and barely acknowledged the handshake he shared with Sir Barristan as he made his way to where the garland was laid out as it was placed on the end of his lance. He rode to where she sat and held out the lance, allowing the garland to fall into her lap. Lady Lioness, I name you the Queen of Love and Beauty, he said, and as the crowd erupted, his heart soared as she smiled and put the crown on her head.